We're going to continue to learn techniques about factoring. These are special patterns. They show up really frequently in college algebra, pre-calculus, calculus. So it's a good idea to know some of these little shorter techniques. However, you need to know that the technique that we learned, method A, that will work on every trinomial, okay? But these will help you do factoring faster, especially when we get into the rational functions in next semester, all right? So let's get started. We have to be able to recognize a very specific pattern, all right? And all of the characteristics have to be met in order for it to be a perfect square trinomial. The first term has to be a perfect square. So it could be like x squared or x to the fourth or x to the sixth or x to the eighth. It also could have a coefficient that's not 1 on it. So it could be 4x squared. It could be 9x squared. It could be 16x to the eighth. Okay? We could also have perfect squared decimals like 0.04, 0.09, 0.25. Okay? The second characteristic is that the constant c must be a perfect square. Again, it's going to be 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. The sign in front of it must be positive. Must be positive. Okay? And then the middle term has to be 2 times the first factor times the last factor. Notice what's going on here. See how these are being squared? Well, it's like these are the square roots, or whatever the factor is that's being squared, however you like to think about it. You take the first, not the square, but the first factor that's being squared, and the last factor that's being squared, and you multiply them together, and then you double it or multiply by 2. Okay? So let's check and see if some of these down here are perfect square trinomials. Our first factor, f squared, is a perfect square, and its factor is x. Our last factor, or c, is a perfect square. Its factor is 9. If I multiply those two together and then double it, I get 18. So yes, this is a perfect square trinomial. Number 2, if I look at the first term, it is a perfect square. Its factor is x squared. If I look at the last term, it is a perfect square. Its factor is 13. However, look here. That is not a plus sign. So that must be a plus sign. So this is not a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. All right, you go ahead and try number 3 on your own. Answer the video question and come back. Here we go. 4x squared is a perfect square. It is, its factor is 2x, or its square root. 9 is a perfect square. Its square root is 3, or its factor is 3. If I take 2x times 3 times 2, that gives me 12x. So yes, this is a perfect square trinomial. Now we're going to learn how to actually factor it. We've done a lot of the work already. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to take the square root of the first term, whatever's being squared, that's its square root, and the square root of the last term, and you're going to write it as 2 binomials. The first, the last, the first, the last. And this sign in here is always going to match whatever sign is in the middle term. So if this is a plus, then this is a plus. If this is a minus, then this is a minus. So let's try this. Is x squared perfect? Yes, its square root is x. Is 81 perfect? Yes, its square root is 9. My 9 times x times 2 is 18, so this is a perfect square trinomial. So I write it as x minus 9 times x minus 9. And if you want to write it as x minus 9 squared, you're perfectly fine to do that. Notice what sign I used. That's negative, this is negative, and this is negative. Okay? Let's try number 2. Is x to the 4th a perfect square? Yes, its square root is x squared. Is 169 a perfect square? Yes, its square root is 13. This is a plus, so we're good to go. So we're going to go x squared. This sign is a plus, so we're going to write a plus 13 and x squared plus 13. Or you could write it as x squared plus 13 squared. I want you to answer the video question. Try number 3 on your own. Come back and check your work. All right, x squared is a perfect square. Its square root is x. 4 is a perfect square. Its square root is 2. 2 times x times 2 is 4x. So I get x plus 2x plus 2, or we could write it as x plus 2 squared. Notice that because this is plus, then this is plus and this is plus. Okay. All right. Let's try number 4, and then I'll let you try number 5. We have 4x squared minus 20x minus 5. We have to decide whether this is a perfect square trinomial. Is 4x squared a perfect square? Yes. Is 25 a perfect square? Yes. Is this a positive? No. This must be a positive, so this is not a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. All right, you go ahead and try number 5 on your own and see if, first, is it a perfect square trinomial? Then if it is, see if you can factor it. Here we go. 25x squared is a perfect square. It is 5x. 9 is a perfect square. It is 3. If I do 3 times 5x, that's 15x, times 2 is equal to 30x. So I do have a perfect square trinomial. So it is going to factor into 5x and 5x with a 3. And then this sign is going to match this sign right here. So we're going to use a minus and a minus. And we can also write it as 5x minus 3 squared. You go ahead and create one on your own, and then we'll talk about that in the morning or during class. And then if you would watch the next video, that would be great.